She's sending word in a different place than usual. So let us begin. To everyone, greetings to everyone, wherever you may be, because, and I can't even make exactly the reference of evening, morning, except it could be evening, or it could be morning, or other times of the day, as my colleague Karen and myself from the Elliott Bay Book Company, which is on Duwamish land in the city of Seattle, in the northwestern part of the United States, along with a wonderful nonprofit South Asian arts organization called Tasvir that also has helped get word out. But we know you, from the people chiming in, are all over the place, Kathmandu, Japan, and everywhere else. And we're so delighted to be doing this program today with Gita Wolf and Ragini Siruguri, who are in or near Chennai, where it is Tuesday morning, as opposed to the Monday night in Seattle. And again, people know where they are, and they know where they are on that spectrum of time, today, tomorrow, yesterday. But they're going to do a program talking about Tara books. And when I say this, it's a little different. We have been doing these programs for almost 2 years, these Zoom programs. And that's preceded by over 30 years of doing programs, live programs of authors coming. And they've often touched on the publication of books. We've had some authors who are publishers, such as the late, great Italian author and publisher Roberto Calasso, who also was a major significant publishing figure in Italy. But in having Gita and
Ragini.
Yes, I know, Ragini. I'm like going all over. I'm in a different place too. Ragini, doing this today, we're going to specifically talk about Tara Books. They are a publisher that was started in 1994 by Gita and others, and they for a time had some distribution in the United States. United States is not always at the lead of these kind of things. As I one time went to a literary festival on my first trip to India and saw a stand for Tara, and I heard people like Roberto Calasso and others talk about their books in Europe, in Italy, and other countries. And so their books have been published in many languages. Many of the books have, and certainly had a readership and following throughout the world. When we had them in their earlier distribution, everyone was going, "Oh my God, what are these books? Where did they come from?" Because they're handmade books, handmade in silk screen by hand, book by book, page by page, as well as offset books of various kinds. Some would be pitched or imagined as a children's book, but others drawn particularly in the area of folktale, myth, legend, place, done by artists who are always named and given their center place to the creation of the book, and often in stories. And I shouldn't keep talking because I do this in the store, though. It's sort of an example. Anyway, that distribution arrangement ended, and then we found out a way to get the books ourselves into Seattle from Tara directly. And then the pandemic started, and all that kind of came to a halt. But it's been picked up, and we've had a series of shipments that come in, these amazing packages. And as much as things come into our store every day that everyone gets excited about, there's a special level of excitement when Tara books come in, and they do come in. You're going to see at least one book, but I don't think I brought a few of these to where I am. This is one of the small, beautiful hand-bound books on cats. This is an offset one that they know this about the forest. That was also published as a children's book. Brer Rabbit. There's books on Greek myth. There's all sorts of things, and I'm not even holding up the book that's probably been the most famous of the books they've done, The Nightlife of Trees, which has gone through 15 printings in English alone and numerous other languages. But of that same area, which is these sort of incredibly singular books, the newest one of these is The Deep. I believe I would say is the newest on the scale of two artists, Meyer Valleda and Tushar Valleda, who went to Japan and got a whole experience of the ocean, what is in the ocean on the surface and well below the surface, and have done this in a beautiful book. And I'm not doing justice by not opening it up, but we want to get on to Gita and Ragini. So they will be talking about, they have a little program, but part of this will be, you'll see what they do visually, and you will hear them talk. Gita is the founder, and she's had a she's the one who's sort of made sure Tara is what it is, and it continues to be, you know, in a time and world where a lot of things that start out one way go different directions, not always true to their sort of initial essence. And she's, you know, others who've worked with her have been doing so wonderfully, keeping that spirit. Ragini is the visual person at the press now, making sure the books work visually, and that she's the creative director, I think is the title. And as what she's done there is a marvel too. And I may say something at the end, depending on how much they've said of what the other does, because it really is marvelous and wonderful. We hope you'll put questions and comments in the chat. That will get worked in toward the end of the hour. And I will therefore disappear from the screen and come back at the end. But to say again to everyone who's with us from everywhere, great thanks, appreciation that you're here joining us. Karen will be putting information on the chat about the books, about Tara. Go to their website, there's films of what they do that also part of what they do. And I even talked about the cards, the prints, the many other things that Tara publishes that again are part of this great and beautiful work. So again, please now, thank you, and please join in giving good virtual attention and applause wherever you may be to Gita Wolf and Ragini Siruguri. Thank you both.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you. Ragini is our designer. We're really delighted today, not only because you've kind of made the first part of our presentation redundant, you've spoken so much and so beautifully about the work that we do that, you know, there's not really much left to add, except that we're really, really grateful that you have us on. I was just telling Rick that I discovered, you know, how they promote reading, and also about the wonderful Elliott Bay Book Company. I've been reading a bit on that. So thank you very much for having us. I'm going to be, you know, I'm not as tech savvy as Ragini, but we're going to try doing something. We're trying to control this, the presentation we have at two ends. Please do be patient if for some reason that doesn't work out. And, you know, I'll be moving kind of the slides here, and if that doesn't work out, I guess Ragini will take over, right, Ragini? That's it. So moving on. Okay, let me see.
You should be able to do it.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
Yeah,
yes, there we are. There we are. Oh, did I do that or did you do that?
doesn't matter.
Yeah. So basically, we're going to speak of how we publish. I mean, Rick very kindly introduced me as the founder. Well, in a sense, yes, but you know, Tara wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for lots of people who joined in the beginning and also along the way. And somehow we do see publishing as giving a voice to just different perspectives that come together, and we see our role really as curators and, you know, of the astonishing talent, vision, imagination, skill that's out there. And one thing I guess that links us also to Elliott Bay Books is our focus on the physical book. I mean, it's not that we're not for technology, but we just think that we do what we do best. And I think there is a great need for something as tactile and as communicative as the physical book. So we haven't really gone into ebooks, though I do read ebooks personally, but I think that what we do remains in this form, and it's best in this form. So just going to move on. Ragini, perhaps you could do this smoother or faster. Are you doing it or am I?
All right.
All right. So in '94, so basically it was me and a couple of artist friends who started the publishing house. And to be honest, it's not that, you know, I didn't have an investor, I didn't have a plan. It's just something that's grown organically, also from the vision of all the people who came in at that point. So every book that we've made, every direction that we've taken has been kind of what people have contributed and the direction that we've been going in. So that's what I want to say when we say it's how it's evolved. It's been quite organic. Let's go to the next one, Ragini. Yeah, this is, so we were working out of little rented places for a long time. And this bespoke building, this beautiful building has been around now for the last around 10 years. In fact, we just celebrated the 10th anniversary. And you can see here, it's in Chennai in South India. We have on the right, you can see the bookstore. And then top left, you can see some of the murals that we have of indigenous artists. And then it's architecturally really speaks to the way we work, because it's kind of a large building which is connected in a small, the footprint is really small, I have to say. It's not like we have a huge space, but it's been built in such a way that you can really see all sides of it, and you can see how everything is connected. Our offices, the place where you see the chair here, that's where we work, to the left of that room. Let's move on. And here you'll see the team. This is more or less, I mean, there are people who have come in, there are people who have gone, there are people who have been steadily there right from the beginning. And the important person here, I have to say, is Arumugam. Ragini, if you point out who he is, he's the one who does the production work. Yes, the fourth one on the right. And my colleagues are all up there. This is Gita, who is a co-editor. Then you've got the younger folks also in editorial marketing, people who are packing. So we consider really every aspect of publishing as important. I mean, back in the day, when we first started, we would just create books and forget about selling them, because, then move on to the next. But we've realized over the years that, an important part of making books is to bring them to readers. And that's grown over the years. So, and I think, everything, including how they're packed, how they're sent, where they are, all this, we've realized subsequently how important it is. Let's move to the next one. This is, so you'll be seeing a little more of the books that these folks do. We have 25 people in a dedicated workshop. You could say it's like an artisanal workshop that make books. They're binding. You can see them binding books here by hand. It's an old skill with handmade paper. And this is where the printing and binding happens. Next. Yeah. So quick introduction to what we do. You could say that, primarily they're visual books, visual and, words and text together. So it could be folk tales, it could be children's books, So one of the things we had to struggle with, and okay, these are our children's books, which you can see are pretty varied. We're interested in education. We're interested in, my partner Gita and I come from an old feminist tradition of, championing not only, tokenism for having a woman there, but literally in having strong women characters and making sure that every book it doesn't have to have a message, but that it's sensitive to how power works, and this could be in different aspects of it. So we're interested in education, we're interested in just reading as fun as well. We publish mainly in English and also some in Tamil. We've got a couple of books in Hindi, but the different markets in India, it's almost like you need to know them really well. So we haven't really done extremely well in the other language markets because, that's a whole new field. So this is mostly English. Go on, Ragini. Okay. Now, these are, because of our fascination for the visual, these are books that we have done not for children, but for adults. And here we stumble on a, let's say, understanding that even for kids, that you grow out of picture books into chapter books, for example, that there is something that words are somehow at a higher level of, let's say, of understanding than visuals are. And we don't think so. So these are some of the books that we've done, which are not strictly for children. And they also combine words and visuals. And I think one of the most important things, and I'll come to that later, is India being so multilingual. There are so many languages, that one way for us to cut through this multiplicity of languages and to get to visions and worlds that are not our own is through the visuals. So the artists that we work with essentially communicate through visuals. And that's why, the image is so important for us. So in that way, we're able to bring them in equally as authors. Yeah. Let's go to the next one. Yeah. So, indigenous art tradition. So even, back in the day, right at the beginning, the thing that we were most excited about were the number of artists and art traditions that were there in India. They were our contemporaries. They were not historically from the past. They were living right there with us. They had something to say, and something to say about a world that we should know more about, and which is as deep, as profound, as sophisticated as anything that we know. But we don't hear about it so much because they rarely come into the space of a book. People have, they draw on walls, they do wall murals, they do work on floors. They also have begun to sell their paintings and fairs, and to an extent, some of them also in contemporary art galleries. But, a book does something special. A book brings in a context, a book brings in a story, a book brings in their world. So I think to bring these folks into the form of a book is to give them a certain validity, and a certain, they can travel, they can really travel. And I think these worldviews are something that should be preserved and passed on. Yeah. Let's go to the next. Okay. The handmade book. Now, why do we even bother to make something by hand when you could do it much faster on a thing? But for two reasons. I think initially when we started, it's like when we looked around and say, what do we have in India that is so special? We have a lot of skill. We have a lot of people good with their hands. We have a lot of people looking for work. So when we initially started printing these books made by hand, it served all these purposes. I mean, it's like, how do you bring the art alive in a book? How do you bring the artisanal quality, and how do you also form a community of people who are book artisans? So you see a whole range of books here from our handmade press. And as Rick said, they range from the Greek myths to something like the Land of Punctuation, which is completely typographic, to other things. So each of these, serendipitously happened. With the Greek books, it was a Getty Museum who at that point of time had asked us to sort of do these myths for them. So that's how it came into that. The Land of Punctuation, we're really interested in contemporary design. We're really interested in type. And I think what we do well is to sort of join these things together, like to bring some of these traditional forms along with the authors and the artists into contemporary design. I mean, that's really exciting for us. Next one. And Rick has mentioned the prints, cards, and stationery. We do this because, most publishers will know it's hard to make a living just through books. I mean, we've done it, but these kinds of, we have a wealth of images, and we share royalties equally between those who make them and the artists. So, I mean, they're beautiful on the wall or to give away. And I think they make a very nice source of income for all of us. So I think that's the reasoning behind these cards and stationery set. I think Ragini, you've designed the one on the right top. These scrapbooks for writing in, and these are all offcuts. These, we try to use whatever we have. These are offcuts from the printing floor. These are bits of paper that are left over. So we try to kind of, I think the word is upscale them and bring them, into a form that they're usable. We try to waste as little as possible. Yeah, let's go to the next one. Print processes. With the physical book, offset. Back in the day when we started, offset wasn't so great in India. I mean, you did have presses, but to actually get good quality printing was really tough. It's become much easier now. So if we had a special book, we'd go for screen printing. And we also had a love of, some of the old processes like letterpress, the image that you see bottom left, or even block printing bottom right. And risography is something that we tried. This is a form of printing originating in Japan, where it's almost like a photocopy thing. And we discovered later, and so we've learned through this. It's just the excitement of experimentation. We've learned through this what works and what doesn't work. Risography, for instance, in our climate, we discovered that it's so humid that the inks never dry. So if you have a Riso book, you find the pages sticking to each other. So then we said, well, maybe we should only be doing prints or cards with these and not books. So some of these experiments have gone well and some haven't gone well. We try to match the print process to the perceived value of what the book would be seen as. And this is also a long and hard process of learning, I have to say, because it's what happens is when you work like we do, every new thing is a risk. We just don't like to keep repeating what we've done. And every time we take up a new thing, we're not sure if it'll work or it won't work. And happy when it does. So in that sense, we're excited, but then as a business, it's pretty risky. Let's move to the next one. You would have got this by now, which is the author, illustrator, and designer, and the production team. So we actually decide on how we're going to produce the book right at the beginning, and the designer and the printer work together. So all of us we have to pitch in and make it a co-production. Many of the artists we work with, I have to say, are not formally literate. They don't read and write. So often it's a question of recording them vocally, putting down what they want to say, reading it back, getting corrections and so on. So it is very collaborative. Yeah. I mean, the number of traditions, the number of artists in India is just amazing. It's just, there is something, and we worked in other countries before, but we keep coming back to India with this sense of wonder of how how we're still able to talk to them. They're not as alienated. I'm not saying that they don't, they're not marginalized or all that is there, but they're so happy to take their work forward. And all experiences that we've had with them have been really, really people who are eager to see their work in books and to have their work travel across the world. I mean, this is something that I think is very, very, very special in India, is how accessible our artists are and how happy they are to have inputs and take it forward. So that's something we've enjoyed doing. And just showed you a broad spectrum of, these are all our artists and authors, but I will go into the traditions a bit more. Yeah. So one of our favorite forms, this is Pradhan Gond art from Madhya Pradesh, and one of the earliest. This you recognize from the Nightlife of Trees. What's special about this form is how I'll go into this a bit later again. How detailed, how conceptual, and how much it tells in one image. I mean, the image is very compact and very conceptual. So let's go to the next one. I'm sorry, I have to rush through this a bit because there is really a lot to say, and I just wanted to give you an overview. So this is Mithila. Mithila is from Bihar in central India, and it's mostly women who paint Mithila art, but this is a man. Again, you can see the fineness of the lines, the details. And this is an artist called Rambaros Jha who spoke about, it's like a little journey through his meanderings by the river. So this is Mithila. This is Peel, and one of my favorites because of the sheer joy of the thing and how it is. It's as you can see, it's much more primeval in a sense, just happy and very spontaneous and very quick. This is again from Central India. And we've got a couple of books with Beel art. Now this is something, this is a textile form called kalamkari. We differentiate, I have to say, I don't have the time to go into details, but we differentiate between something we call folk, which is more village-based, more part of Hindu society. And then we have what you would broadly call tribal, which is outside that. And then even there you have differentiations between, where people come from, how long it's been going on, what medium they use. Basically, it's just a pictorial way of relating to the lived world around them. Now, kalamkari is essentially a very sophisticated dyeing technique. These things are made, what you're seeing here is on cloth. So it's mostly vegetable dyes and carried on with a bamboo brush on cloth. And we've got, I think, one book, one or two. This, I think we're going to look at, this is Patua from Bengal. Now, Patua is a great narrative form in the sense that Patua is a scroll art. So, you have people unfolding back in the day when that was the entertainment. They would go from village to village singing and unfolding their scrolls. So if you think Gond art is conceptual, like one image has a lot to say, here you have one thing and then the next thing and then the next thing. So it's a very narrative form. And this is a form that we've used. This is a scroll for kids called A Village is a Busy Place. You can see why. And we've used this also for graphic novels because that's how it works. It just goes from sequence to sequence and, marvelous crops and flashbacks, and they're able to do amazing things with stories. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, this is from the deep. This is Warli from Maharashtra. Again, this is painted on mud walls. Basically, it's a kind of ritual art form that the origins of it. Mud walls with lime and chalk is the white thing. And artists have now gone on. What you're seeing here is a background which is it's like a homemade canvas made of cow dung and clay on cloth, on layers of cloth. And it's also typically again with a bamboo brush and very fine lines. I have to say though that some of what you're seeing here is from our book, so it's already traveled a little bit from what you might see on the walls, but the relationship is nonetheless there. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, this again, we've got a book called The Cloth of the Mother Goddess, which we actually block printed on cloth. And this is an art form from Gujarat, from the West Coast. And it's blocks. It's block printing and hand painting on cloth. And a very poignant tradition. You see here, many folk forms have the story of paying obeisance to the creative goddess. Giving an image of the goddess to herself is considered the highest form of worship. I mean, and you can't get any more sophisticated than that in your understanding of art. So this is a form from Gujarat, and we've just finished a cloth book And we just brought that out. Let's go to the next one. Yeah. Some of the artists that we work with are self-taught in the sense that they don't belong to any recognizable tradition. They may be even starting one for all you know, because the woman who did this, all her family paint, and they all paint in this form, or draw rather. And for the lack of a better word, we call this urban folk. She, the artist, is from a group of singers who move around in Rajasthan singing spiritual songs and settled down in Ahmedabad in Western India and just began to draw. And what she loves to draw are strong women, and what we love to publish are strong women. So here we are. Let's go to the next one. Meena. The scale of this is amazing. This is from Rajasthan. And these are mud walls where women, you know, it's a fairly patriarchal society there. So women rarely are out of the house and they're veiled. And but this is something they do in public spaces, in the village squares, outside of buildings. They actually climb up on ladders and, you know, huge paintings. So to reduce this to this form, we had to give the artist Sunita huge sheets of brown paper on which to make this. So our work with them is sort of thinking through the scale, the way the painting is done, and how can we take it forward? How can we also bring it to a lot of viewers? Let's go to the next. Yeah, Pithora, again, a ritual form. This kind of image is consecrated by a shaman in the village. So you'd have a patron who, to ward off evil or to, you know, bring good luck, would commission a painting, and you'd have artists executing it. And then the shaman would actually bring it to life. So he'd be talked, the pictures would speak to you then with their various stories. We've got a children's book on this called Painting Everything in the World. Artists do like to paint outside the ritual space as well. I mean, they keep a strict differentiation between what they would do for a ceremony and, you know, what they would do outside that space. Yeah. Yeah, so I've already given you a bit of an overview. All indigenous art, so you can say women's art is kind of the alphabet, as one of our artists said, of indigenous art, which is, these are the floors and the walls that are the thresholds, the places where you cross over into the house, both decoration, welcome, and kind of auspicious. So they would do special ones for religious festivals, but also everyday ones. Thing about this art is how ephemeral it is. Like, you know, some of them you'd have to do every day, some perhaps a week later, some of them on the walls perhaps every season before the monsoon comes. So the whole conception of what art is it fades. It has to be renewed. So that's also something very special to keep in mind. Okay. So here is a new book that we are evolving. This is the farm where I live. You can see, and this is these two young people are Tushar and Mayur Vaidya, who did the teep, and sitting here with some of my colleagues, and we're developing a new book on seeds. So that's yet to come. Yeah. So the origins of art, and I'm really happy that Rick decided to take up this title, because kind of it brings together all that I have spoken about earlier. And I think it brings together this art theory in a way that we didn't expect. And I'll tell you why. Because when you know, what we used to read is mostly Western aesthetic theories on art, like you need the space to paint, or you need to. What we experienced with all the artists that we worked with is, it's almost like the human need to eat and drink and sleep and paint, you know, and they would either have art, they would paint on the walls, or they would carve, or, you know, they'd be going about in the village and you'd see people with carrying little logs which they would carve as they were grazing the cows. So we see all this, we thought, there must be a different way to understand art making. Like why do people do this? And it's basically a way of communicating aesthetics that we haven't understood. So we brought this together in this book, which is why I think it's very special. Yeah, and you'll see why. Yeah. So we chose this Pradhan Gond art because we firstly, Baju Sham and some of the top artists there have been good friends for over decades. So we know a lot about them as friends and also as colleagues. So we know enough about them to venture there and come up with putting something together which explains or traces how art making came about. And all of these books are with Pradhan Gond artists in Madhya Pradesh, and the place that we went to was a village called Patangar. So we were curious about, and it's a tradition, I have to say, which has grown, which is kind of exploded. It's quite young in this form. I mean, it's not more than 30, 40 years old at the most in the way it's practiced now from back in the day when they would do it on the wall. So we were wondering about how did it come to be. Let's move to the next one. And how the idea came about. So we'll have to wait for this next slide, even if it's slow, because I think it's
Sorry about this
one. Yeah, that's all right. Don't worry.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. We need to do this. There was an exhibition. We've had exhibitions around the world, and we had a major exhibition in Tokyo at the Itabashi Museum. And of course, there was a whole room dedicated to Pradhan Gond art. And one of the things it featured were large, wonderful photographs of life in Patangar, this Gond village, along with, the same room contained the artworks. You can see them there in the back. So that's where the idea came. It's like, there's such a deep connection here, and it was right, the layers were right in our face. So that's, I think, where the idea for the project began. Yeah. So the two people, bottom left, you see Kodai Matsuoka, who's the Japanese photographer who had a great fan, you could say, of the nightlife of trees, as you can make out. He went to Patangar and took pictures, which were in the thing, in the museum that you saw. And there's our old friend, Baju Sham, who we felt is a good person to accompany Kodai, go there and trace some of these things. So we wanted to bring together images of life in a Gond village, along with the art, and see where it took us. So our idea, we came up with a set of themes, because over the years we'd gathered, the thing with the trees, say, or the tools, or the connection between art and architecture, the living spaces, the animals. So we knew what kept repeatedly coming up in Gond, Pradhan Gond painting. And so this is the content that we curated. Right. Yeah, and here you see, so that the three elements. Now, so what we had with these pictures, what we had was Bhaju's commentary, we had the artwork, but we still needed a third element, and this is where I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ragini, who actually put it all together. And that's the difficult part. And, and a lot of serendipitous things happened, I think, as she was putting it together. So over to you, Ragini.
Yeah, thanks, Gita. So I think the interesting part about this project is that Kodai, the photographer, found inspiration in one of our very well-known books, which is The Nightlife of Trees. And this book made him visit the village of Patangar and take all these amazing photos. So I feel like we've come full circle with origins of art. it began at one of the very old Tara books, and now it's become one of the newer titles. So when Kodai handed over the photos to me, it was hundreds of photos in folders in a hard disk, and I had to go through this entire hard disk. And so how does the design team choose what to decide, what to use from this huge bank of photos? So it was very overwhelming at first to figure out, like, where do you begin? How do you come up with a design concept? And as a graphic designer, the first thing that you think of is, what is your page size going to be, and are you going to have a grid? Is there going to be a template? But somehow, because this whole project was so conceptual, and as Gita said, it worked on so many different levels. There were multiple layers to it, and I felt that the design had to bring out these layers. Like, the reader has to understand the complexities and the different narratives that were going on in this book. So what I did was, if Kodai found the relationship between the artwork in Nightlife of Trees and the actual trees in Patangarh, there must be more connections in other aspects of the village, maybe houses, maybe the art, maybe food. So there had to be some way of finding these. And so what I did was to go back to all the books that Tara had published with Gond artists, and try to find similarities between Kodai's photographs and see if I could find any visuals. Because a book about Gond art, which had words by a Gond artist, had to feature art in some way. So the very interesting thing, what happened, and it was a huge coincidence, was that I began to find visuals from these books, from these already published books, that were exactly like the photographs that Kodai had taken. So this book we have not asked artists to draw to the photographs, but these have been found entirely by coincidence. So we published a book called Water a couple of years ago, and this is the artwork by an artist called Subhash Vyam. So you can see how similar these images are to each other, as well as relationships between people and animals, human beings and animals. Then there was similarities between craft. This image is by Ram Singh Udveti. It's from a book called Between Memory and Museum. Then there were women's activities that, as Gita said, they do on a daily basis, like painting on the floors of their houses. There was similarities between musical instruments, as you can see here. So again, these are images that I found in already published books, and the connections were so clear, and I wanted to use these images in Origins of Art in some way. So you can also zoom into details, patterns on doors or furniture or walls. So it was not only similar on a surface level, but it also was conceptual. So for example, the artwork on the left is from a book called Curation, and this was done by Bhadru Shyam, and he calls this the 7 types of soil. And you can see that the colors he has used are almost picked up like a palette from the fields in Patangarh. So clearly, these artists draw a lot of their inspiration from their everyday lives, their surroundings, their village. As well as very, very deep concepts like time. And this artwork also by Bhadru is called Time. And this can't be just a coincidence. I think it's much more deeper than that. So So now it became a bit more complex. Now, how do you bring these all together? You have Kodai's commentary, you have Bhajju's commentary, you have all these wonderful photographs, and you have these pieces of artwork collected from various books. And how do you link all these things together and come up with a layout that makes for a good reading experience without completely confusing the reader? So I think the way we eventually finalized what the book looks like was very much led by the photographs and the images themselves. So unlike a very straightforward book, I could not have a template. I could not say that I don't think I could have decided that this side can only contain text and this side can only contain images. So the playful relationship between photograph and artwork had to come through, which is why we kind of, each page is very organic. It's driven by the image, it's driven by the photograph, and you have Bhajju and Kodai's commentary interspersed. So basically, my thinking was to design each page to act like to have it converse, have the images and the photographs, the artwork and the photographs talk between each other. And then you have the words kind of guiding the reader through what is happening on the page. So it's quite incredible how similar these the photographs and the artwork is, and it's very fascinating that the artists' lives are so intertwined with their, I mean, their work is so intertwined with their lives, rather. I don't think it can be separated, really. So I think, Gita, maybe you can take over once again.
Yeah. Here, we had done, you would have seen that all the work is filled with these detailed patterns in Gondat. What we discovered during our work with them is every artist has a signature pattern, something that they have chosen from. You could say this is the mark that a plow makes as it goes through the ground, or this is the fishing net that we see, which you see on the left. So each of them have chosen a pattern, and you can make out who they are just by the way they fill their paintings, as you can see here. And this is an early book, very early book. And today we would have done it differently, because I think it didn't do justice to the richness of the material which was there, and perhaps we would produce it differently, say more today than we did. But it's always been at the back of our minds. So when Origins of Art came up, we decided that we would use, because actually what we were showing in our Origins of Art is one more step behind what these people are saying. So if they're saying this is the hooves of a cow as it moves through the field, you're actually showing the field and the cow, and you're making a much larger connection. So signatures seem to have a place here. And Ragini, what the thing with the handmade, you have to explain. Yes.
Yeah. So what we did was to revisit this older book, and we thought that it must feature in some way in Origins of Art. So we took the patterns from the book signature and we kind of adapted it to Origins of Art. And because we wanted to bring in the textural quality, some kind of textural quality, we decided to screen print these and insert them into the book. So if you look at the book, the most of the book is offset printed, but somewhere towards the end, you have one section which is entirely screen printed. So this is on handmade paper, and it feels and also smells really nice. So I think this added yet another layer to the book. So you can see one of the artisans at our book workshop actually preparing the screens to print this form. Yeah.
So and this to conclude, when we had finished and when the book was there, we thought of the title. And again, this brings us back to, you know, how you assume you're the center of the world and anything that you say carries for everybody. And here we have evidence that what people have been saying about the origins of, perhaps it was different, perhaps it was something else. And this was what the conclusion that we came to is, by bringing these voices in, we're adding to a plurality of the discussion of how does art originate? How does it go from something that is done on the walls for decorations to such a sophisticated art form? And I think that the title, we thought long about it. It's not the origins of art. We're very clear on that, because I mean, you can't speak for everybody. But it is one of the ways art originates. And I think that's what we wanted to communicate. And I think that by our work overall with our artist friends from indigenous communities is just to make sure that this plurality, these visions that are not ours, but we need to have them. That's what publishing is about. And that's what we'd like to curate and enable. I think that's how we understand publishing. So finally, this is something that I've said earlier. We think the physical book has a place because, you know, you can, there is something about the tactility of it, the time you can spend, the way you interact with the physical book, I think is simply different. And I think it will always have a place, and this is what we do best. Yeah, thank you. We'd be happy to take or answer questions. I'm not sure how we should be doing this. Should we be reading the questions or talking about it? Or...
I can add, I mean, it looks like one question so far, but there may be other, because there have been some great comments. Thank you both for
You're welcome. Yes.
It's been lovely, both of you. And I've seen some of these things in books, but to see them held this way on a, albeit on a screen, if we were in a room together, that would be a different way. That's the physical. But let's see, Aditi has a question. How does one go about working with Tara to get an artist book published? Are there guidelines? How, and this is for both of you, both one or the other, or both, however you wish to do it.
Just write to us. I mean, at Tara Books, and we've, you know, go to our website. We've got a space for people to get in touch, and, you know, tell us what your proposal is, and we'll get back to you.
So, and this is me as following up to that. I'm sure when you began, you know, it was you seeking people out, artists, places, but now you must have people coming at you or to you.
Sure.
How has that changed for you? The part of seeking and, you know, your own seeking versus the coming at you. And there are some other real questions coming out after you have.
Yeah, that it's a mix of both, really. I mean, I have to say that we've rarely had anyone come to us where we've just taken the book and published it. And usually people will come to us with ideas, and if they're happy to work along with us, you know, we have taken it forward. There have been one or two manuscripts that, you know, are completely, there's nothing you can touch or say, but that's been really rare, and we enjoy the work. So it's a bit of both.
Yeah. Let's see. Rohini is asking, this is of you, Gita. You had mentioned that you would do signature differently if you did it now. Could you say a little more about that? I guess, I mean, you went in a little bit with that, the Origins of Art book.
Yeah, I think it's the stage, it's when we knew what we knew. I think I would say more. I think there'd be a longer essay. I think it might be, though prohibitive, it could be a handmade book, because I think the designs, the patterns, the beauty of it hasn't really come out in the book. Printing, I would do it differently. I mean, I just conceive of it in a much broader scale than what we had then. Yes, it's a germ of something then.
Yeah.
I think Origins of Art has gone on to do that.
Yeah, good. And we will. Ragini, you should probably, I don't know if Ragini's seen Origins of Art or the 2 books. That would be also part of it to you certainly to see what Origins of Art is. It answers a lot of, it raises and answers so many things in its beautiful way that it does. Samart has a question to both of you, or at least is posed, and welcome. She's Samart is doing this up late if Samart is in California, where they're a PhD student and writing a dissertation on the collaboration between Tara and Pardangoan artists. So someone's really seriously looking at your work. Would you say that you've been endeavoring a newer kind of collaboration, an ethical collaboration between publisher and indigenous artists? And I would guess, go ahead and you could answer that, because I think you've been doing that, but relative to others in the world.
For sure. I mean, it goes back quite a long way. When we did, I think you've seen an image of one of our first books called Beasts of India, where the artists actually we took that work from existing artwork. So they were just excerpted from that. So when we asked the artists for permission, they said, yeah, sure, because they're used to selling work. And I remember we did a very basic contract with them about royalties, but they didn't quite get it. So when, the year came around and we sent them checks, they said, what are you paying us for? You've already paid us. I said, no, that's not how it works. I mean, if you sell a piece of art, like one copy of something, people can buy it and put it up. But say it's, if I make hundreds of copies, then the whole thing is, it's a different thing. So then we decided that you have to explain the concept of publishing and royalties in a clearer way. So we have a very simple document in Hindi that explains what royalties are and what we can use the images for instance, the cards, that you will get, again, royalties from that. So yes, we have been doing that continuously and making sure that it's come to the point where we feel even the printers should be mentioned. I keep thinking of how this was this fight in Hollywood to get all the people mentioned who are making films, right? I mean, there was, at some point of time, you have the screen credits that come, and book publishing is such that perhaps the designer is mentioned, but not everyone who's printed the book, say. So with our handmade books, we even got the names of everyone going. So I think one is acknowledgement. The second is fairness in terms of economy. And the third is asking for permissions for, taking the book forward. Are you okay with this? Would you suggest something else? So I think a conversation all along the line. It's not like you've got, when you work with people who are more comfortable in the contemporary world or in a certain class of people who are aware of how it is, they ask the questions. Whereas here you have people who are hesitant to ask questions. Not everyone, but they feel, it should be fine. So it's we who have to tell them, please ask us these questions and see if it's okay with you. Yeah, I think that's the thing.
We don't have too much more time because
oh, sorry.
No, you're good. And more questions coming in, but I want to ask a question of the kind that can't get asked so readily in other kinds of exchange. But that's really about, and this is something maybe for both of you, but Gita, this is something you, as you say, with others started in 1974 and with a vision that's evolved and continued and deepened as you keep learning and taking in things. But you also, as you've gone along and through the wonderful group of photographs of those who work with and for Tara now, and there's been others who've come and gone. How, and maybe this is also for Ragini to say what it's like to come into something that has this kind of vision and dedication, because it's not always easy to convey what that kind of vision over time and over individuals, and to keep it steadfast in a way. There's a lot of things coming at you in the world that will seek to compromise what you're doing. So I'm curious how you impart within Tara, within the community and both internally, but then also as you work with artists, with other people in the community and other people in the world you're engaged with.
What, Ragini, do you want to answer?
So I joined Tara 6 years ago in 2016. And I have to say that I joined just out of college. So I did a course in design, in graphic design, and then I joined as an intern. So I think it really, working with everybody here really showed me a new way of being a designer. So I think whatever I had understood, what it means to be a designer in those 4 years of education, I had to quickly unlearn all these things and understand a new way and a better way of working together with all these people and creating objects, art objects like a book. And I think, at least in India, I don't think as designers, we're involved in the process so much. We come in much later in the picture. So design is seen as a very surface level addition to kind of beautify something, but it does not tie in so much with with the other aspects of a certain object. So for example, with books, I've had to understand how the budget works, or how printing works, or how the editorial team functions. So for me, the past 6 years, I've really understood so many different aspects of publishing, which matter to the design of the book. So it's not something that I do all by myself and somebody prints it, but I need to understand and be in touch with all these different teams. And it's only from it's only from these conversations that we work backwards and arrive at a design. I don't know if that fully answers your question.
Okay,
well, briefly, I'll say that I think we've learned through making mistakes. I think the smart thing is not to make the same mistake twice. So,
that's something that acknowledgement, also speaking of acknowledgement, isn't always common. I've seen people get that, they build up what they're doing and they feel like to admit this mistakes, or that's some vulnerability that not everyone is able to do, but that's all to your credit, and part of why I think your books are the way they are and are seen the way they are.
I just want to very briefly wind up with the one question, which I think is, which I'm eager to answer, which is whether we've done books with artists and from local artists from Tamil Nadu. Yes, Tamil Nadu doesn't have a huge visual tradition, but we have done, it has great craft tradition. So we've done the book with the potter, which is based in Tamil Nadu. And we've done stories from Tamil Nadu as well. So yes, we've got a small line of Tamil books as well. Yeah, that I would have liked to answer. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. We should probably, there are other questions. One quick one that Prashnath has asked about getting these books outside India. I don't know where you are. You can order them from Tara in India. They do ship all over the world. Elliott Bay, a bookstore I'm part of in Seattle, can get things certainly around the US. We ship elsewhere. It gets more problematic sometimes to Canada and some other countries, but anyway, that can be managed. The books are, and I believe there are ways of writing them and finding out where else in the world the books are carried, like they are at Elliott Bay in Seattle. Anything else we should probably move on. I know Suvani, there's a question about the graphic novel form by a few people. What
yes.
You see graphic novels, which isn't quite what you do, but is there interest in that, or?
Yeah. I mean, we've done loosely. I mean, we've adapted the graphic. I See the Promised Land, Sita's Ramayana. All of these are graphic novels in a sense.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, we're very interested. Yes.
Yeah, I think to briefly answer Suvani's question, I think it was especially Sita's and I See the Promised Land was interesting because the artists had to kind of adapt their art form to the graphic novel format. So it was a very interesting exchange between us as a publisher and the artists who come from a narrative storytelling tradition, such as the Patuas. So yeah, it's one of my favorite books. So I had to answer that question.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
No, thank you. We should probably, you have your day to get into. Some people have their nights to go into and everything else. but we actually maybe we hope we could do something like this again. I mean, it's just been so wonderful to have this conversation. I mean, this image up on the screen about the boundaries of the physical book, those of us who work in bookstores, which are very much about the physical book. And it's been a battle over the past few decades to see what you're doing, not only with you within the context of Tara's own books, but what they represent to others, commitment to books and the beauty and what's in them is inspiring, really. And that's, I think it's heartening to see other book professionals who respond to seeing what you do and go, oh my God, they're like heartened to see that. And we get to see that in their eye and their hands when they hold the books. And so it's nice to be able to convey that to you. And many others in the comments are saying such things as well. So thank you both again.
Thank you for having us on and allowing us to speak to this wide range of people. Thank you for being the kind of booksellers that you are. I mean, we need each other. Yeah, and thanks for spreading the word about Tara, which you have done, and for your generosity, and kind of we're in this together, right?
Yes, gladly. Ragini, it's been a pleasure. Well, we have met a little bit, Gita and I have along the way, but Ragini, it's the first time for us. And plus, pass along our greetings to Deepali, your colleague who I write all the time about book orders. So
yes, she probably is online. And Karen, thank you so much for making all this possible in the background. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you. Blessings to the work and and thanks to the artists again, all the others who collectively and individually have been part of what you do and that you have helped give voice.
We should. Yeah, we would love to, and all the best to the bookstore as well. I mean, anything we can do, we are happy to do. Yeah.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye, everyone.